pyramid. Down there is the book that, because I had a lot of lack of understanding of why we had to build a pyramid. In '68, we were told that if we did not build a pyramid for my then 3-year-old son, before he was 10 years old, that he would not stay with us. And so we went ahead and built a pyramid. And that pyramid was to counteract what the U.S. government was doing at Sawyer Air Force Base. Because you have to realize that if they put up this antenna system, it would affect all the waters of the planet and would have damaged the Gulf Stream. What would have happened if they damaged the Gulf Stream? It would severely damage the planet. So that is why we had to put up our pyramid in 1975. Now you can see down here at the bottom the magnetic map. The Upper Peninsula of Michigan is full of copper, and it is a massive magnetic field. So then our government connected by winding wires around to, I had a friend named Dixie whose husband worked at Sawyer's, and he would get into an elevator and go 7 floors down and worked on the computers 7 floors down. But they connected that all up with these 2 huge antennas, the Space Needles in Seattle and the Space Needle in Toronto. That connected the Atlantic and the Pacific so they could pulse the whole Earth and all its water. And that would have had a severely damaging effect on our planet. Can you see that? In 1975, when we built a pyramid, we took over that system. And the designer of our pyramid, we built a pyramid like an organ box. And when we built our pyramid, there was also a Great Lakes vortex, which ships and abnormalities occurred. There was also the Bermuda Triangle. We built our pyramid there in Michigan, and that stopped that abnormalities, and you never heard of the Bermuda Triangle after we built our pyramid. Because we took control of the magnetic field. Now, my son works with a space commander called Hilarion, and they monitor this whole system. So that is why this antenna system has given to us. But it is also important, if it's given to us for a purpose, this is a planet of free will. And you have to realize that the angels, the fairies and divas, all of these people are really out of work. They need to be worked with. And so what I have done through an organization called the Sisterhood of the Emerald Fire, I've developed a simple little vortex field, which we'll talk about later, and I have a handout downstairs if you people want one. Okay? Are there any questions about this antenna system? Do you see anything that you would like discussed? Because this is your talk. It's not, and I want you to understand the whole situation. You have a question?
I'm from Michigan, too. And where is your pyramid located?
Halfway between Kalamazoo and Grand Rapids.
Okay.
I'll walk over here and point it out. Most people don't know. We live right here. Okay? And see, the Great Lakes vortex was up in here, and the Bermuda Triangle. I'll go back. So I live in Allegan, Michigan, which is halfway between Grand Rapids and Kalamazoo. You have another question? Yes. How big is the pyramid that we built? It's a capacitor, honey. It was built like an orgone box, a layer of electric, dielectric, a layer electric. It is 24 feet by 24 by 15 feet tall. So it's as big as a 2-car garage. And we'll show pictures of it a little bit later. Okay? Another question? Yes.
Yeah, were you contacted by the government?
It was interesting. Was we contacted by the government? You see, what we really have done is we have corrected what the government has done. One snowy morning, two people came from the Navy because the Navy was in charge of seafarer. They parked the car down at the end of our road. They walked in. They came as book salesmen. And inside that little pamphlet, they had nothing but pyramids. And they wanted to know why we built a pyramid. They didn't really ask directly. We just opened that book up, and that's what they had in there. And we talked about the pyramids. And I guess they figured we were harmless. But you see, what you have to understand is there is communications between the Syrian government and our government, and we actually had corrected a very serious problem, and so they leave their hands off us. You want to go back to the stand? So that is basically our antenna system. Now it's up to you as dowsers to learn how to use this antenna system, because I've traveled all over the world. I've worked with the Templars, and I've created vortexes, and I've done some remarkable things. And it's time that you people also learned how to use these. One of the things is I worked with the Knights Templar, and Kay back here talked about the churches this morning and how they are antennas. The Templars, a lot of people say you worked with the Knights Templar. They're evil people. They are not evil people. The temple, what they did is they created a system of generators on the planet. They were Gothic cathedrals, and their job was to make the planet a temple. And they put labyrinths in them, and that was their intent, was to make the planet a temple. That's why they took the name Templars. You want to go to the next picture?
Mary,
Yes.
I am really apologize, but our session just finished downstairs, and we couldn't get up any faster, and I see at least a dozen people came in after I did. Would you mind going over this? I just cannot miss the beginning.
Okay, go back. Okay, while people were sitting in here, I asked them to look at this antenna system. Now, basically, in 1968, when we were coming home from Auburn, Indiana, where my husband was born, we stopped along the road to let my 3-year-old and my 5-year-old go to the restroom. And we lost 4 hours of time. At that time, we were asked to build my then 3-year-old son a pyramid before he was 10 years old, or he would not stay with us. Okay? Since then, I have learned why we've had to build that pyramid, because it counteracted what the government was doing at Sawyer Air Force Base. And this is the huge antenna system that they put in at Sawyer Air Force Base.
And where is Sawyer Air Force Base?
In the Upper Peninsula,
Okay,
right there on the map.
I don't see, oh, there, I see it now, okay.
You see, the magnetic field around the Upper Peninsula is this huge magnetic field, which they grounded out by wrapping wires around. Then they built down 7 layers down. They had an computer system which connected to these 2 towers, one for the Pacific Ocean, which was the Space Needle, and one for the Atlantic Ocean, which is a CN tower. And they could pulse and generate the Earth with any frequency. It was really, people, the biggest mind control device on the planet.
So it's a huge government project.
It was a huge government project, yeah. And when they do these things, if you ever realize the Seattle Space Needle was an amusement park, the same way as the Millennium Dome when they wanted to build another one, they do. So I just wanted you to see the antenna system that we're working with. And by creating a vortex within, even by saying the Lord's Prayer, you can deactivate this thing, and you can send your own love energy through the system. Okay, the next picture. Whoops. the other way. This is to show you how we're connected. I did a lot of work at Saqqara. People know what Saqqara is. Saqqara is the place in Egypt where when they wanted to build the Great Pyramid, they gathered a lot of people together and taught them levitation. A good book to read is Elizabeth Heiss's Initiation. Tells about her life at Saqqara. Saqqara is a place where people are given the food to recreate the earth. And you see, in the time of Atlantis, we cracked the earth. North America and South America were together. Europe and anyway, they were together. And we cracked the earth and created the Atlantic Ocean. The earth was wobbling. And I really didn't go in this, but in my book, there's a lot. They put a wheel weight, like you would put a wheel weight on a tire, and that was the Great Pyramid, so the earth wouldn't vibrate out of orbit. And that's why the Great Pyramid was built in the first place. Next picture. You can see how, thanks to Peter Shampoo again, you can see how the Great Lakes is really the breath of the planet. And it purifies, it's designed to purify the earth through its breathing through the Great Lakes. And that is the importance of the Great Lakes. That's why it was important for us to build a pyramid. Again, Peter, what does this show? It shows how we were connected to the Bermuda Triangle.
This is a radial structure. If you were to draw out to places where you've been and worked with
Okay.
various Bermuda Triangle, yes, center of North America, and like Grand Tetons and such, Sedona and such places.
Just shows you how this whole grid is connected. Okay, next picture. This is my son's pyramid. We now have each boy, I have 3 sons. Steve, which is my stepson, he's going to be developing his land. My son John, who was 3 years old at the time, and my son Mark Saqqara. We live at Saqqara. This is my son John's pyramid. We have now 3 properties, 2 pyramids. Okay? This is our pyramids at Saqqara. Okay? Now, you have the sword and the cup. In the Da Vinci Code, when Hank said, this is the sword and this is the cup, the pyramids are a cup. The obelisks are a sword. And that is how energy moves through space. You have a high pressure and a low pressure. And it's like a slinky toy. Energy spills off into those vortexes. Weather moves across the planet in vortexes. So when you have these realize that a pyramid is a vortex generator, an obelisk is a vortex generator. So when you tune those together, they will spill energy back and forth between each other. Can you see that, people? Okay. And that is how our antenna works. So if you wanted to go back, if you wanted to go out and get up and greet the sun in the morning, you could create a vortex and say, well, one thing that I did, which was in 2009, when they were going to our schools and sticking live vaccine up the children's noses to create the H1 virus, saying that that was a vaccine. And schools were shutting down like hotcakes in the middle of April. I had the right to interfere. The first thing you have to understand is if it's going to affect you. Well, my grandkids could not go to school because they were shutting them all down. So I went to the Fairies and Divas. I went out in the morning and said, I would like you Fairies and Divas to go to the, and we'll get into how complex this antenna system is, because I worked through the crop circles in England too, okay? So I went to the Fairies and Divas and I said, I want you to make a crop circle. So every time that they do a contrail or they send a frequency to give us the H1N1 virus, the Fairies and Divas and the elders of the planet are going to change that frequency to benefit mankind instead of harm mankind. So in 2009, did they get a pandemic started? No. And I will just tell you a little bit. When I came back, I went to the Crop Circle Convention in August. When I came back, I don't know if any of you have ever gone through customs, but when I went through customs, they pushed me over to a man, and he started interviewing me. Why did you walk among the crop circles? Here's 300 people trying to go through customs, and they're interviewing me about crop circles. And then, this is Homeland Security, then I couldn't find my suitcase. So I went to somebody and I says, my suitcase isn't here. He said, trust me, lady, your suitcase will be in Grand Rapids when you get there. When I got there, my camera was damaged. They had taken every picture off of my camera. So that's Homeland Security. So they knew that I had done something, but what I had done, they couldn't tell. Okay, next picture. Okay.
What does the obelisk in London have? Does it have anything to do with in London, England?
Well, you see, when they raided the Egypt, they took obelisks and put them anywhere. Many people put obelisks over their graves, war memorials. It creates a frequency, and it's a matter of how that is tuned. Okay, you want to go back to, if you have two types of obelisks. You have a light obelisk because you have in the earth upshoots and you have downshoots. Okay? And when you have an upshoot, you have a hollow pyramid, and you have flutes in it like you would a flute, you know. And then on a heavy obelisk like this is, the energy comes down, and when it hits the base of that, it pulses like this, because that's how you tune the energy. And so they knew, if you knew how to tune an obelisk with a temple, then you could move energy from that temple to that obelisk, or back and forth. Okay, the next picture. Okay, well, the Great Pyramids, you saw that. This is what Peter has drawn for us to explain the difference between our two pyramids. And you see, we have our own Nile, the Kalamazoo River. Kalamazoo was boiling waters, was very spiritual Indian river. And you can see the Pyramid 2 down here is my son John's pyramid, and Pyramid 1 is Saqqara. And that is just some of the pictures of the mapping out of the energies and how it is affecting our whole antenna system. Do you want to show the next picture?
The other two anchors, one is the Tesla Dam.
One is the Tesla Dam up there, and the other one is what?
The airport.
The airport. So you've got earth, air, water, and fire represented in. Peter has helped put together a lot of this information for us. So this is Peter's show as much as mine. Next picture. Can you get it?
Your magnetic field, Mary, is just too intense.
But you see, this is also connected, this ley line, which is a vecus pieces. You have two vortexes, one from South Saqqara and one from North Saqqara, and the line that is generated between those two is the Independence Hall in Philadelphia and the Bear what is that called?
Devil's Tower.
Devil's Tower. So you see how whenever you put up this, you can affect this antenna, and if any time you wanted to do anything, you could go out and stand in the middle of a field, create a vortex. Kate this morning said she went to this old church that had been destroyed, and she created the cross. And the energy from that just shot all kinds of energy fields out. Okay? Okay, this then shows that with all this engineering, we really can affect the growing plains of our crops in the United States. It also connects with New Orleans. Okay, the next picture. Now, in every city, you have a sword in a cup. Can you see the sword in the cup there? You can go to Detroit, you can go anywhere, and you will see, this is Asheville, North Carolina. I went down there to their 10-10-10 situation. But you see, this is an old Civil War monument, and this is a fountain. And so somebody on the planet, I don't know if it was the Masons, I don't know who it is, but they've put in all our major cities swords and cups. And you, with your consciousness, you don't have to do the Holy Grail Vortex. You can go out and do your own prayer like the Lord's Prayer, and just 95% of what we do is intent. Bring peace to the city. In fact, in Brighton, the man went down to the old fountain in Brighton, and because Brighton, England, was a hot place where motorcyclists were coming in, and he created the Fountain Society, which he just had people do that little prayer, and it changed the whole frequency in the area. So you, as dowsers, have the ability to do that, and that is why I really have been asked to come here and talk to you. You are responsible for keeping the light on this planet, and somebody has given you an antenna system to do that, okay? And now we just need to do that. Okay, you want to read that? The white race is a wicked race. Gray Eagle talked about Tecumseh in 1811. On Stevie's property, my stepson's property, two of my friends were sitting there, and two Native Americans came to us. One was the prophet, and one was Tecumseh himself. And he asked us to use his techniques. Now, Stevie's property is on the right on the San. How do you say it? Andres Fault, right? What? New Madras Fault. That's right. It's on the Stevie's property is right on there, and if Peter took a map, you could see where the faults come together almost on his property. So it's a very important piece of property. Now, it's not known, but there was a famous Indian chief around 1811 when he died that came to that area and is buried there. I totally believe that that was Tecumseh brought there because he wanted to make that area his headquarters. His brother had a city called Prophetstown that was not too far from there. Now, what Tecumseh did is he said, we're going to have a great prophecy, and he bundled a bunch of sticks up, and everybody was to burn them at one time. Well, after they were all burned, there was a great earthquake. So that was the prophecy. Now, these are the Native Americans. I went down to Cherokee. That's why I went. And you see, this is a picture of Tecumseh right there. The one on the right is Tecumseh. Now, if you look at Stevie's grandfather, his mother's dad, Bud and Tecumseh look an awful lot alike. I don't think that's by accident, okay? But these are the different Indians. If you go how many of you have ever been to Cherokee, the museum there? What was asked, Tecumseh asked, is I went down there and asked the natives from the south, north to unite with the natives. I mean, the natives from the south unite with the natives of the north so that we could work with the New Madras Fault, because the oil spewing out of the well has done one thing. The thickness of the oil has caused the vortex in the Gulf to slow down. Now, where were all our snowstorms this year? They didn't come across the nation. Because they slowed down, they were diverted around and went up Florida and hit New Jersey New York. That's because the Gulf has been slowed down. Now, using this antenna system, I don't live in that area, and I don't want to play goody two-shoes. It's not my problem. But if you have a problem with that, then you can use this antenna system to maybe make that oil less thick and ask that the whales and the dolphins, the elders of the planet, the fairies and the divas that work with the plant life, create a vortex that will be more congenial to going back to where we don't have that problem. Because that whole problem affected the Gulf Stream, and when it affected the Gulf Stream, you had Europe very cold because the Gulf Stream was partially shut down. We don't want that for our planet. Whose responsibility is it to correct that? What? Yours, that's right. And that's why I'm giving you this information. It isn't the elders of the planet anymore. Once you learn you have a responsibility, you have to take that responsibility. This is how our vortexes work. When we do the Holy Grail vortex, we say from the point of light within the mind of God, and we bring it right down to one point. We say from the point of love within the heart of God, we bring it down to where it's green. Those are two counterclockwise vortexes. That sets the frequency. Then when we say the great invocation, from the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, now you make that a cup. So you have all that splashing down. The third ring is a cup, okay? And the fourth ring sends it out. Now, Hilarion, if you get on I can't remember the website, but if you get on that website, and I might have it I have a statement of purpose downstairs, and you can get that, and it'll have the website on there, I believe. But he says to say the great invocation at least 9 times every day. Now, you imagine that all these pyramids are scattered all over the planet. You've got obelisks all over the planet. Just ask that these be tuned to a frequency which will help Mother Earth balance. And by saying the great invocation and putting the intent of love into it, that's all you have to do. And Hilarion wanted us to say it at least 9 times every day, especially before this group of horrendous tornadoes went across the United States, because that's all vortex energy, and you've got to detune these frequencies because Mother Earth has been damaged. Okay? Next picture. And this is on the cover of our little pamphlet, which I will hand out to those who don't have one. I didn't want to, because last year I handed them out. I brought about 100 of them, so there's plenty of them. If you want 1 or 2 to give to your friends, you come down to my desk. Not all at once, but sometime during the day, and I'll sit and I would rather sit and talk to you and explain to you how to do the Holy Grail Vortex so that you totally understand it, okay? Next picture. Whoops, go back. This is the Holy Grail Vortex. It tells you how to first create a counterclockwise vortex, create a second counterclockwise vortex, just like I showed you, create a vortex clockwise, create a fourth vortex clockwise. And when you're doing that, you say the great invocation. From the point of love within the mind of God, you create the first vortex. From the point of light within the mind of God, you create the first vortex. From the point of love within the heart of God, you create the second vortex. From the center where the will of God is known, now you turn that whole vortex into a splashing down with a cup. You see that? And then from the center, which is called the race of man, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the doors where evil dwells. Just saying that now, because of our antenna system, will, with your intent behind it, and open up your heart chakra, that will bring love, light, and peace to the planet. Okay? This is an antenna. Now, this is Brighton's fountain. And that little lady standing there is Jenny, and she lived at Rinless Chateau. So in 1996, when I was at her house, I met with the Templar Knights, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But this is Brighton's fountain. And when I went to do the Holy Grail Vortex, this is the fountain they taught me to do it. You see the first thing from the point of light down to the first tier, from the point of love down to the second tier. Create the cup from the center where the will of God is known, from the center which is called the race to light, send it out. Can you see how the Templars taught me how to say the Holy Grail Vortex? Yes.
In that last picture, at the very bottom, there seems to be a clause that says, never do this exercise unless you have permission. Do we have to ask?
That is a very good point. If you want to be goody two-shoes, okay, you never set up a vortex unless you ask Mother Earth, unless you ask the whales and the dolphins, unless you have permission to do it. Thank you, because I never said that.
And 3 people apparently.
It's, you know, when you play a Tibetan bowl, it is so designed that it plays a chord. You get more results if you have 3 people doing it. Now, what I've done is I have asked different people in my area. I will go to them and say, okay, Dee and Dove, I need to do a vortex. They're doing something at Rinless Chateau and I don't like it. Do I have your permission to work with me? So that's how I get 3 people. But yes, these are rules that you should follow. You never do anything without permission. Because if you do something without permission, you can bring that energy right back on you. The first time I went to Dee and Dove, and I was going to be smart, and I was going to stop a hurricane. So what I did is I connected some of the obelisks that we'd put in the United States, pulled the top of that hurricane off to those obelisks, and reduced the power of that hurricane, but I didn't ask permission and with no harm to anyone. Dove, Dee, and myself were so sick for 3 weeks because we did not ask permission. So you ask permission. That you have a very simple law. Who am I? What am I? As I am not, but as we are, I am. Everything has to be copacetic. And to you, my creation from the elders, to you, my creation, my perfect love is your perfect freedom. If you interfere with somebody else's freedom, because I don't know who needed that lesson, it wasn't my lesson that I just wanted to see if I could influence a hurricane, okay? And I could, but it wasn't not my position because I didn't ask permission. And everybody that, you know, when Katrina hit, all the sisters in the sisterhood asked permission if they could do something with the sisterhood, with Katrina, and we were told we could not touch Katrina. I believe Katrina was a government-generated phenomena, and we could not touch it, okay? But other vortexes, like Ike, we could.
Did they give a reason?
No, they didn't give a reason.
How do you know that you can't do it or do it?
It's a feeling, honey.
Oh, feeling.
It's a feeling.
So douse it out, right?
You are a dowser, and I said this to you before, you douse it out, okay? We have this conversation, Dennis, before, right? I said you're a dowser, douse it out, okay? Okay, next, so that's Brighton's. Now this is out at our house, see, because I often get up at sunrise, and I ask permission to do different things, okay? And that's just, now, what's important to you understand is pyramids are vortex generators, but by changing the angles on a pyramid, you can generate a different frequency within the pyramid. The heart chakra is almost 52 degrees. It's 51 minutes, 51 degrees, 51 minutes, 51 seconds. And that activates the heart chakra. That is why the Great Pyramid is at that angle. But if you wanted to work on a different frequency for a different reason, you could change the angles of the pyramid to generate a different standing wave or vortex. Can you imagine by a vortex being generated out of a pyramid, it creates a standing wave. Now, Bearden came up with what we call scalar energy. And as that pyramid pulses, it creates a tuned frequency. If you have the angle at 52 degrees, you get a tuned pulse that works off the heart chakra. Can you people see that? So you can design anything you want with this antenna system. Next picture.
Stand up a little bit. You say your magnetic field is.
Okay. I noticed, I just watched the guy from Belgium talk. You see you have a cup and a vortex coming off of it. And it just, this is a standing wave going into what they call a torus, going into a cup. Next picture. Last year, some of you were in my class, and we used this as an example to shut down the wellhead. But you understand that the wellhead, when they opened that wellhead up, there was a huge methane gas under that, and they feared that the whole Gulf of Mexico would blow up. So that's one theory why they kept it running. Even though we probably could have shut it down, it wasn't allowed to be shut down. Okay, and again, how we use that is from the very center there, from the point of light within the mind of God, counterclockwise vortex going right into the first little vortex center there. From the center where from the point of love, coming out to the edge of the green crop circle, okay? From the center where the will of God is known, we come right out to the edge, create the cup. And then in the middle you have, I'm going to walk over here. You can create a Star of David. You see, from this point to this point to that point creates a triangle. And from this point to that point to this point. So you can spin that as a Merkaba. Anybody not know what a Merkaba is? A Merkaba, you take the Star of David, only it's a three-dimensional Star of David. And a lot of people say that's how UFOs operate, is by spinning the Merkaba. Okay? It's an energy generator which we could ask for the electromagnetic field, and we could push the energy back down into the hole itself. Okay? That is how we use that crop circle. Next picture. Okay, this is a crop circle that generates a Star of David, and you could spin 3 petals one way, spin 3 petals the other way, and it would create a little motor, and you could force, with those motors, you could put them all over the Gulf of Mexico and spin those motors and force that oil back into its area. Can you see that? Okay. What happened?
I don't know, Mary. I went back to the beat and pressed the wrong button. Sorry, everyone. Can you fill in some space for me, Mary?
Yep. Okay. We have a technical difficulty here.
Well, while you're trying to figure that out, can I ask a question?
You can ask any questions. This is your talk.
With the Katrina, you were
That's good
told
right there.
that you couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah?
And you said because you felt it was government done. Yet I feel that the most important work we need to do is against evil, which can be the government or could be other forces, but
For some reason, everybody said their hands had to be taken off. We could not do anything. Okay? I don't know why we couldn't do anything. It might be some karma that the earth had to go through. I don't know what was involved. But every time that you create a vortex, you ask if you have permission. Okay? Now I'm going to tell you a little bit about the setup of the plains of Sulbury and how the crop circles really work. Did that answer your question, or did it? We're supposed to be against evil. Your name is? Roxanne. She said that we are to counteract evil. I don't know why we couldn't touch Katrina, okay?
And yet, you're working against negative governmental programs in other cases.
Yeah. We're working against other negative programs in other cases, yes. What? The hierarchy. Now, you see that up at the top? That's Salisbury Hill. See the little cone up there on top? Okay. And in Mulberry, there is another cone like that called Merlin's Mound. In 2006, the Templars invited me to go to the plains of Salisbury because crop circles were not allowed to happen. Our government decided to use the frequency off of satellites that any time a crop circle was to be made, it generated a vortex, and they would tune into that vortex, and with interdimensional weapon, they could stop the vortexes from being made, the crop circles from being made. When I came here in 2006, it was about this time, and I took a bunch of you out to the labyrinth out here, and we created the Holy Grail vortex, and that next morning 3 crop circles were created. But what was necessary for me to do is I went the end of May to England, and the plains of Salisbury are chalk. The best way to stop a laser from destroying something is to hold a mirror up. Right? So I went there, and with the fairies and divas and with all the elders of the planets, we turned that whole plain into a mirror. And then we went back in time, because the Templars can do that, and activated the 2 vortex generators at the ends of the road between Avery and Mulberry, which is Merlin's Mound and Salisbury Hill, as generators to activate that. So they couldn't stop the crop circles from being made. Now you have to realize that crop circles, the main control panel after we destroyed Atlantis was Stonehenge. And if you look at Stonehenge, it marks the number of days that the moon comes up. It keeps an accurate record of the tip and tilt of the earth. And that is more or less put there for a reason, and that was anybody coming into our atmosphere, they could read how many times the sun came up, how many times. So it was a record of keeping the days, and they had a little trim, it's like a trim tab on an airplane. They could put something on top of the Saracen stones and generate just the slight tip and tilt of the earth. That's all in my pyramid book, okay? But go back to that picture. But what's beautiful about this is right across the road from where this crop circle appears is the sanctuary. The sanctuary was how they moved the blocks. The sanctuary was located between the 2 vortex generators, Merlin's Mound and Salisbury Hill. And it was a system of circular mirrors. And so when they wanted to move the blocks for Stonehenge and they wanted to move the blocks for Avery, they could direct the energy down from the sanctuary, which was generated between these 2 vortexes. Now, this year, look what's appeared across the road from the sanctuary. You want to show a different picture of it? Okay, look at that. We have the 2 pyramids, and I take that as the Hardy pyramids in the crop circle, generating all kinds of vortex out from them. I don't think this was an accident. You can interpret in the crop circles anything you want. This is what my guides told me. And this appeared the end of May. So this is brand new. And to me that says, I'm coming to the dowsers. I'm giving you the opportunity to use this antenna system through the crop circles any way you want. Okay? That's what that message says to me. Okay? The next picture. This is another picture of it. Now, this is another crop circle, and I really feel that this represents the three Hardy's pyramids. And Steve's land is not really developed yet, but one of these days it will be. So that's my three boys' crop circles. Okay? Now, after I went to the plains of Salisbury in 2006, this was the first crop circle that appeared. What does that say to you? Salisbury Hill is a little bigger than Merlin's Mound. You can see them both represented, and you can see the energy going back and forth between the two like a slinky toy. Can you see that? That's exactly what was said to me. That was the first crop circle it appeared right near Salisbury Hill in 2006. And to me it said, that's Merlin's Mound. It's a picture of Merlin's Mound. Merlin's Mound is in the school in Mulberry where Kate went to school. And you really can't go in there. It's not kept up. It's not supposed to be seen at all. Next picture. And that's a picture of Salisbury Hill. So you have the two mounds. And that crop circle in 2006 appeared right next to Salisbury Hill. This is Stonehenge. Now, in 2001, I went to Stonehenge because we had ended the situation with Y2K. And the Knights Templar created a vortex around it. Do you want to show the next picture? This is the amusement park built in London's harbour on the Greenwich Mean Line, which is the Millennium Dome. What they wanted to do was George Bush Sr. was going to cap the Great Pyramid at midnight 1999 and send the energy, with a surge of energy, up to the Millennium Dome. That surge of energy would have done what? Created Y2K in a big time, wouldn't it? Can you see that? That's what originally Y2K was about. In 2006, when I was standing at Rinless Chateau near Jenny's house, the Templars came to me and said, you have been trained as a Mary and you have an antenna system that we can work with. So for 2006, 2007, 2008, 1996, 97, 98, 99, I went back to France. Go back, please. I went back to France, and what I did is went to the Pyrenees Mountains, went to Mount Serrat, where the Templars had the Ark of the Covenant to activate the Pyrenees. Pyrenees meaning pyramids. And I went to cathedrals, and during the Second World War, the Rockefeller Foundation had gone into the cathedrals and recoded them. And the Templars wanted me to create the Holy Grail Vortex in the middle of the cathedrals to retune them to something that would benefit mankind instead of harm mankind. Now you can see all the engineering of how they directed the energy from the Great Pyramid up to the Eiffel Tower, down through these Ferris wheels, right into the Millennium Dome. And if that would have been activated, you would have had Y2K, which would have been an electrical shutdown on the whole planet. Okay? Next picture. Yeah, you did it again. Okay. Well, we're trying here, okay? Did we get to...
It might be better if we just start. Any apologies.
Okay.
Not my usual job.
Any questions? You have a question?
Yes, why is it called the Holy Grail Vortex?
I don't know. That's the name I was given it. The Holy Grail, everybody, the Templars were in search of the Holy Grail. There you go. Yes?
Is the Hilarion you refer to the same Hilarion who works with the inert energy?
I don't know. Hilarion, as far as I know, works with my son, and he's a Syrian space commander.
That's the inert energy and
Yeah.
tremendous power there.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, is there a more formal name than
Well, we have a system called New Saqqara, and Saqqara was where the elders of the planet at the time of Atlantis took them to Saqqara, to a place where you learned how to use the rods of Ptah, how you use levitation to move the blocks and create the big antenna system, the Great Pyramids. Now we don't need that great antenna system, so we call ourselves New Saqqara. Okay? Does that help answer your question?
So we call it the new Saqqara antenna system.
New Saqqara antenna system, that's right. Because I would wager that if you believe in past lives, most of you probably have been trained at Saqqara. Many of you probably used the rod of Ptah, which was a vortex generator, which would have levitated. And now we're going to the old Saqqara. This is Saqqara in Egypt, okay? And that's the entranceway. After you walked through the entranceway, you couldn't get into it unless you had a DNA that allowed you to go into it. The next picture. And so when you walk through the entranceway into Saqqara, it had actually the frequency of the DNA, but there were 4 pillars at the end. And those 4 pillars, I believe, represent earth, air, water, and fire, because you were taught to use those frequencies being trained at Saqqara. Okay? And of course, this is Imhotep's pyramid, the step pyramid. This was the first pyramid that was built. And where my son and myself are standing, this is my son John with his arm around me, and this was in, I don't know, 1980 or 1990, I think, 91, was where the temple of sacrifice was. Before you were given an instrument of Ptah, you had to go through the temple of sacrifice, which meant you sacrificed all your anger, your greed, your fear. And if you were caught by those energy fields, you could never be given a rod of Ptah. And that's where I remember this stuff. I don't know where it comes from. To me, this is my remembrance, okay?
Elizabeth Hayes remembered too.
I know Elizabeth Heiss remembered too. And there is the seat of Isis out behind Saqqara. Now, when we were there, our tour ran out of money. And they left half of us out there. We had to find our way home. And some of them, Doug Benjamin, who speaks at our seminar, he was holding on to people and he was levitating and they were screaming and they were chanting, Mother Earth is dying, Mother Earth was dying. So I really feel that some of us who come to teach at New Saqqara were actually given a mission at that time. Okay, next picture. Now this is where we were trained to use the energy. You would walk up to those steps, you would stand in a room, they were stood in front of a mirror, and you had to control your electromagnetic field, why sound, anger, energy was beamed at you. And if the next picture shows the tuning forks, all along, still in stone, you see the tuning forks. So you had to control the frequency within those little rooms, and that's how you were trained to use the instruments. And this is all recorded in Saqqara. I don't know where this information comes from, except when I went there, I could see it. I remembered it. And that's what I remember, okay? And of course, around the top, whenever we did anything, we stood in the niches and were energized by the walls of Saqqara. There was only one entrance in, and there was like a sine wave around the whole thing. So if you stood against the wall, you were energized. This is in France. This is in St. Maximine Church in France. This supposedly, there's a skull inside there, and that is the skull of Mary Magdalene. Anybody can go to southern France and go to St. Maximine. And you see, one of the reasons the Templars chose me was I was trained as a Mary. What does that mean? That I was trained to use my heart chakra in such a way that I could spin it and emit emerald green fire out of my hands and bring balance. I can't do that. I'm trying to train myself to do that. But that was what being trained as a Mary. Next picture. Mary was always pictured in emerald green. Because if you're going to emit emerald fire out of your hands when you work on somebody, and of course they use the oils. They use the oils to activate the higher consciousness. Okay? Next picture. This is the limbic system. Smell really activates the emotions. I have a paper downstairs where, how much more time do I have? About 5 minutes? Okay. Smell activates, and I can give you 20 minutes. 20 minutes, okay. Smell activates, you have the olfactory bulb, which has a lot of little antennas hanging down, and that goes into the amygdala gland. And the amygdala gland has two parts. You can bypass the posterior part of the amygdala gland. When I first got into the oils, and maybe some of you oilers have done the same thing, I put oils on people and start pulsing them. They'd start screaming and going back into their past lives. That is because all of that is recorded in the posterior part of the amygdala gland. There was a man named T.D.A. Lingo who studied with, well, he was in Patton's army, and he studied the amygdala gland, and he taught people how to click their way into the frontal lobes through the anterior part of the amygdala gland. And I have a paper if some people want that. If you click your way into the anterior part, you can bypass all that trauma and drama, unless you want to go through it. That's up to you. You can bypass that, enter the frontal lobes of your brain, and transcend time, space, energy, and matter. And when you transcend through smell, time, space, energy, and matter, you can actually travel this grid in any way you want to. And I have an exercise that if we had extra time, I try to help people do that, and then I set a pigeon on their head or a whatever bird, and I have them take the anterior part of the amygdala gland, and then we fly all over. These are exercises you can do. Look at the grid, see what you need to do. I have some of those exercises downstairs for you if you want them. But I'm just not going to hand them out unless you want to come and talk to me about them, and we'll go through them. Now, one of the places in southern France is St. Mary's de la Mer. St. Mary's de la Mer is where Mary Jacobi and Mary Salome came, and that's a picture of them right there. That was James and John's mother. And there's a place where Mary Magdalene and the Marys taught near Marseilles called Mount St. Baume. This is the next picture of Mount St. Baume. So you see, you always see Mary Magdalene in emerald green. This is from Lawrence Gardner's book with a red cape on. Oops, go back. But you see the bottom picture there is the church, the Benedictine church at Mount St. Baume, where you have to climb up and you can actually go into the church. And there is a hospice down in the valley you can stay at, and Mary Magdalene is much honored right there. And that's not too far from St. Maximus, where her skull is supposedly. So the whole history of Mary Magdalene is right there. You can feel her. That's a whole healing mountain. It's called Mount St. Baume. And that's where the Marys actually taught. But they came across the sea from whenever they came from. After the crucifixion, the Essenes were put in boats without oars, and they used their minds to bring them. And the Marys came to St. Mary's de la Mer. And every year at the end of May, the gypsies come in, and they sing and they dance, and you can celebrate the landing of the Marys. And then you can go out to St. Mary's de la Mer, Mount St. Baume, and actually climb up and actually go to the place where they actually healed. It's quite a journey if some of you were interested in doing the history of the Marys. But Mary Magdalene always read. Now, this is myself at St. Pete's Cathedral in Jerusalem, in Rome. You see there what you see. You see the sword, and you see the cup being the church itself. Okay? An interesting thing, I'm in Young Living, and they take the top salesman on a trip. In 2007, they had a trip to Rome. Now, this is how my elders work for me. I was not even close to ever achieving that rank of diamond in Young Living. And all of a sudden, you have to have, you know about it, you have to have 6 legs that reach silver. I had 7 legs that reached silver. Never had any more than 4 before that. And I said, oh my gosh, I got to go to Rome. So I went to Rome. I didn't know what my job was. I was going to take the Holy Grail. I was going to take the Cathar's Creed. I haven't talked about the Cathars. In southern France, there was a group of wealthy farmers, and they were called the Cathars. And they had Jesus' writing called the Book of Love. Okay? These were actually Jesus' writings. And that whole group of farmers, which had they were wealthy farmers, were actually murdered by the church. And one of the Templars named Conan Boyle, who also created the Fountain group, channeled the Cathar's Creed, which I often say. And I thought, well, now the church murdered these farmers. I'm going to go create a vortex over the obelisk. I'm going to go create a vortex over the church. I'm going to recite the Cathar's Creed and ask that the Book of Love be returned to the Catholic Church, which was Jesus' writings. So I sat there and I did that, just because that's what I felt I was required to do. And what happened is the whole courtyard filled up with Templar knights with their swords in the air. Out came John Paul, the last pope, and what they had done with him is they had encased him in gold. Many of you may have seen him being carried around St. Peter's Square in his golden robes. Before he died, they had encased him in gold, so that when he left, he could not empty out purgatory, because that's what he was going to do. He was going to empty purgatory out. And now Pope Benedict says purgatory is no longer in existence. What happened is he was put in 7 lead caskets, and he popped out right there, and he ascended. And that was why I had to go to Rome. I have all these experiences. I don't think I could make them up. That is my life. I'm taken around. It's a little hard for some of you to understand that, but that is how I work with this antenna system. And so you can see how the whole thing, Bodini's obelisk there creates a cup also with a sword in it. And you can send that so everything in the churches and in our cities, we have the same antenna system repeated. And I feel that the reason why I had to come here is to say to you people, you have a job to do. It's your job to work this antenna system. It's been created for you, your dowsers. I would say many of you, whether you believe it or not, have been trained at Saqqara. You know how to use these energies better than 95% or 98% of the population of this planet. Okay? Next picture. This is Chartres Cathedral. Okay? Stay back there. How many of you have walked the labyrinth before? Okay. The reason the Templars, you see, you never had the vaulted ceilings until the Templars came. And they created these resonating chambers. And in the resonating chambers, they put labyrinths. And when you walk the labyrinth, it takes you to a 12th dimensional stargate. And often on the labyrinth, they would have the road to Jerusalem. Now, when I first, the elders of the planet sometimes are called, and in the beginning of the Bible, you have the order of Melchizedek. Okay? The order of Melchizedek comes from Salem. Jerusalem means New Salem. So if you walked into Chartres Cathedral, walked the labyrinth, and were shot up to Jerusalem, you would go through the 12th dimensional stargate. Okay? Next picture. A lot of people have not heard the word tachyon, but most of Tesla's inventions were created by tachyon energy. Tachyon energy operates in that fashion. I can, let me think, yes I can. And when you walk a labyrinth, that stimulates that frequency within your brain to activate that consciousness. And what I was taught to say from the order of Melchizedek is, who am I, what am I? As I am not, but as we are, I am. So, as we are, as a dowsing community, we are. And we can be anything we want. Jesus said, these and greater things you can do also. Just know that you can. Okay? And then what the order of Melchizedek says to you, my creation, my perfect love is your perfect freedom. You are free, and you cannot infringe on anybody else's freedom. So if you want to do the Holy Grail Vortex, and you are told no, then for some reason you're infringing on somebody else's freedom, and you cannot do that. And to you, my creation, my perfect love is your perfect freedom. And I will be with you forever and ever until the end, and then forevermore. So if you opt to be part of the answer, they will work with you forever. And then after you graduate, they will be with you forever. That is the statement that was given to me from the elders of the planet. Okay? And that is the statement I tried. Do you have a question?
I do. You said that the Templars set up the Notre Dame system to be antennas to create the whole Earth as
A temple.
As a temple. In other words, bringing heaven to earth.
Yeah.
And you've also charged us with the job of using the obelisk and the cup.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I'm clear, you're saying that we can put prayers or send prayers with permission to the obelisk and the cup.
That's what.
To broadcast those prayers, am I correct in understanding?
To do anything you wish. If you desire, because they're creating the H1N1 virus and your grandkids can't go to school, you just say, okay, I don't want that to happen. I'm going out to the obelisk. I'm going to say the Lord's Prayer or any other prayer that you want, or the Holy Grail Vortex. I'm going to ask the fairies and divas. I'm going to ask the Templars. I'm going to ask anybody to do whatever they can. And then I saw the vision of the crop circles. And in 2009, there were 79 crop circles created. And 2/3 of those crop circles were created to change the frequency within the grid that was being broadcasted to create disease on the planet. Then they changed it from something that would not harm mankind but better mankind. And that was what I was told to do. Does that answer your question?
Yes, so basically we can do this.
You can do this. Yes.
Now, did you also say that we can use the original system that was set up by, the original, like our,
Yeah, you can.
that one too?
Yeah.
Place an intent in there?
Yeah.
Permission?
Yeah. But watch out if you don't have permission and you say you want to destroy HARP. It doesn't quite work that way. 5 minutes? Okay. Now, in southern France, not too far from Rennes-le-Château, is Mount Bucharest. And if you go back to the sequel, Close Encounters of a Third Kind, this is what the mountain that was, instead of the Devil's Tower, this is the mountain that they use. There's a lot of activity. But if you walk into a cathedral, all the labyrinths were set up to Mount Bucharest. This is a 12th dimensional Stargate. So if you walk the labyrinth at Chartres Cathedral, you'd be shot right up to Mount Bucharest and through a 12th dimensional Stargate. Next picture. And this is Rennes Chateau. Okay. And this is the Cathar prophecy.